Hey YouTube, how y'all doing? It's your boy Zom here with a new video. First off, hope you guys are doing well. A few days ago, I uploaded a video titled "The Gameplay Letdown of Mortal Kombat 1," where I was kind of just sharing my, opinions on why I feel like MK1's gameplay didn't live up to its potential. Whether it was because of bad balancing or poorly released DLC characters. And through reading the comments, I saw a lot of people share the same sentiment and opinions that I have. Whether, you play casually, semi-competitive, or competitively. A lot of people did agree with how I view the game, and there were some people that said, they were never a fan of cameos to begin with. There are some people who enjoy the game and don't see any issue with it. So, in general, it was just nice to see how, a lot of people viewed the game, and a lot of people agreed with how I viewed the game. So, I definitely enjoyed making that video. I'm glad you guys enjoyed it as well. It kind of had me thinking. It had me thinking about MKX. If you were to make a poll right now, comparing or saying which one is your favorite and putting MKX on there, MK9, MK11, MK1, 90% would probably choose, or 80 to 85% would probably choose MKX. Probably the remaining is like majority MK9, and the remaining percentage is split between MK1 and MK11, right? And it had me thinking of why MKX is such a great game. Obviously we know MKX for gameplay reasons. A lot of people love the game in terms of the combos and depth. But I feel like there were a lot of reasons to why MKX truly succeeded and why it's probably most people's favorite MK aside from, the classic old ones like Shaolin Monks, etc. So I kind of want to make this video kind of comparing but not really, and just going over why MKX was so loved by many people. So hope you guys enjoyed this video, and as always, if you enjoy these type of videos, drop a like. And with that being said, let's get straight into it. Oh yeah, first thing I do want to talk about is the gameplay slash variations. As you see here, I made like a little checklist of everything I think that makes MKX the most loved NRS game. And the first thing I want to talk about is the gameplay, because when you think about MKX, the first thing you're thinking about is the gameplay, the combos, the character depth, and creativity. And that's kind of why people still play the game to this day. Even if you don't like the game because of like the competitive side of it, which I've shared my opinions on how MKX is as a competitive game. I don't think it's the best because of characters being absurdly broken, or in the past being absurdly broken. But even one thing I can't deny, or anyone who doesn't like MKX, is the game was fun. And a lot of people, the first thing they want for a fighting game is it fun, and MKX definitely checks that bar the most out of any NRS game, I feel like, because aside from the combo creativity, they introduced a variation system. MK9 was kind of a reboot. And in that reboot, they introduced X-rays, they introduced the bar system, 2-bar breakers, enhanced special moves. They introduced all that. And MKX built off of that, essentially using MK9 system. It had the breaker, it had a new stamina bar for the run, and variations was like the big new creation. And the thing about variations in this game is they felt different. If I was playing, like on screen right here, I'm showing Liu Kang. If I played Dragon's Fire Liu Kang, I get fireball cancels, I get crazy combos. If I play Flame Fist, I get crazy pressure, crazy chip damage, and if I play Duelist, I turn Liu Kang into a setup type character, right? So like, the variations of this game really felt different. Like, characters picking a variation felt like you were playing a different character, or like a different type of style that character had. So like Kotal Kahn is another great example. I'm playing Blood God, I'm getting crazy damage reduction. I'm giving up a wake up. If I'm playing War God, I'm getting this this sword that he can use for combo extensions. And Sun God, I get a command grab. So even though you're playing the same character, variations in this game were really done well, because they felt different, they felt unique, and it led to different playstyles, which also made it, it was good, because if you were playing certain matchups, maybe a different variation does better in that matchup, right? And aside from variations, the combo creativity in this game was honestly off the charts. Like, if you look at the MKX combos, that's why a lot of people didn't like MK11, because if you go from MKX combo depth to MK11, where Liu Kang's BMB and MK11 was 1-2-3 flying kick, I can understand like there's no combos to do in a game like MK11, whereas MKX, like, you have honestly all the combos in the world that you can do. And yeah, because of all those combined, the variation system, which made characters feel very fresh and unique, the combo creativity, the fast-paced gameplay, because of the run button. Even though I'm not the biggest fan of the run button, I probably will never be, because, you know, it kind of skips the whole neutral aspect of fighting games. I can see how it added, you know, depth and creativity to the combo system. And I think I did mention here is added dynamic intro dialogue before character fights. MKX did have its intros, but they weren't intros, you know, they were just a predetermined cutscene, or MK9, sorry. But in MKX, you know, like, that's the first time they introduced the character cutscenes, like, between each other, like Scorpion and Sub-Zero interacting with each other. They kind of took that away from MK1. They expanded on it in MK11. And in MKX is the first time they introduced this, so seeing characters interact before the match was definitely like an exciting new thing for, you know, just people to see characters interact with each other outside of story mode or outside of cutscenes. So yeah, all these together, I feel like that's what really makes MKX stand out, and everything else that's added onto this list is kind of just what made MKX the game that it was, and why people look at it or look back at it with such you know, love, I guess, and grace. But definitely the gameplay is the first thing you'll always talk about when it comes to MKX, for sure, without a doubt. And yeah, that's why I want to go over this section first, because it is definitely the most important. Now, the second section I want to talk about is the roster. Now, MK9, you know, rebooted the whole franchise and probably still has the best roster of MK in general, because they had literally every MK character, and the DLC characters, you know, they added Scarlet, they added Kenshi, they added Kratos, I think, or Freddy Krueger. So that was kind of our first taste at guest characters as well. But the cast had majority MK characters, so a lot of people did not like the roster and MKX looking back, I think. But I think the reason why I mentioned roster in this list is because when you ask people what is their favorite version of a character in terms of how they play, so I guess this ties into gameplay, Scorpion MKX definitely his best iteration in terms of gameplay. A lot of people would agree for that with Sub-Zero, same with Liu Kang. So when you think about gameplay and what characters really shined, I feel like every character, regardless of if you like them or not in MKX, you knew that, like, if a DLC character got announced in MKX, you knew that their gameplay was gonna be insanely fun. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like it's in comparison to MK11, where, like, when Spawn was announced, a lot of people were kind of like excited that Spawn finally got announced, but kind of iffy because of how MK11's gameplay was, you know, slower, not as much combo creativity. But if Spawn got announced in MKX, for example, like, he probably would have played, you know, insane. Like, his combo creativity would have been off the charts. So the reason I mentioned roster is because, I mean, it's different now, because I think people do like the MKX roster because of the DLC characters that were added. And looking back at it, you know, it wasn't that bad. But I know I've heard, you know, takes of people not liking the Kombat Kids, for example. But like, when I look at the roster, when they added Aaron Black, which I still think is one of the coolest new additions, Kodokan was very cool. Ferritor was kind of whatever. Devora was kind of whatever, to me at least. But Takedo was really cool. You know, he made his way back in MK1. So I thought they were really cool additions in that game. And the DLC characters, which I'll talk about, definitely added onto that roster and making it what it was. And yeah, I think really the reason I put this on here is because when I think of best gameplay iterations, I think of MKX. And that does tie into gameplay, but having those characters in the roster, obviously like the obvious ones, and their best gameplay iterations being tied to them, I feel like that ties into the roster as well, because of the DLC characters and also the new characters like Aaron Black and how he was added to MK11. So yeah, it was just a balanced mix, and I think the roster was actually pretty decent for MKX. Now, moving on to the third reason is I want to talk about the competitive scene. MKX was kind of the first. I know MK9 had a competitive scene, and Injustice 1 kind of, but MKX was kind of the first competitive NRS title that really like took off, and it's probably still the best one aside from like MK11 in my opinion. And that's because ESL Pro League, which was a thing, or still a thing, but which was the MKX standard at the time, had 3 different seasons. And if you guys remember Fatal 8, even though I wasn't in touch with the MK scene or didn't really play MKX, I remember seeing Fatal 8 on YouTube. And that kind of, I feel like in Fatal 8, if you guys remember, they introduced a lot of people to MKX, or just Mortal Kombat competitive in general. And even though I probably wasn't, familiar with a lot of people in that tournament, it was still very fun to watch, and it introduced me to MKX. And I want to talk about it because ESL Pro League had 3 seasons compared to a pro comp, And something I always talk about that I wish they did for MK1 is, or just MK11 as well, is they did crowdfunding in this game. So if you guys remember when Blue Steel Sub-Zero was released, any person who bought that skin, that crowdfunded the prize pool for ESL Pro League. And that was the first time in MK, so essentially like that game had 3 seasons of competitive, and it was fun to watch even though the game wasn't the best competitively balanced game. It was still fun to watch. It had 3 strong seasons, and remember, these games only last 2 years with the old cycle, so for it to have 3 competitive seasons in 2 years, like you gotta think about, that's how popping MKX was essentially, right? And that game definitely blew up. I think that's what put MKX in the spotlight, or just like MK was always a franchise in the spotlight, but that's what put MK competitive in the spotlight. And because of crowdfunding and those 3 ESL seasons, competitive MKX was definitely like a highlight of, like, even to now, aside from maybe MK11 year 1, MKX ESL is probably second, like easily, or maybe first, so MKX was definitely, competitive scene was great. And in addition to that, MKX also introduced, rollback netcode, because if you guys remember, I wasn't playing at that time, but I do remember the MKX stress test was announced, and that kind of introduced rollback netcode, which a lot of people were asking for, because netcode before that was horrible. It was delayed. And yeah, introduced netcode, rollback netcode, which made online play way better for tournaments, whether it was ESL or Kombat Cup, I think they did at that time as well. So the competitive scene for MKX was just very active, very fun. Crowdfunding was a thing. Just to this day, I still don't understand why crowdfunding is not being brought back, especially with the numbers of that number of fans that Mortal Kombat has nowadays. The fact that we still haven't done crowdfunding since 2015, it's kind of just insane, because nowadays crowdfunding would go such a long way for MK as a franchise, for its competitive scene. And to see MKX, a game from 2015 that did it, as well as have 3 good competitive seasons, I just wanted to mention that because aside from the gameplay, the competitive aspect of it was great. So yeah, just want to touch base on that. And the next section that I want to highlight is DLC. This is actually a very big section. I was thinking of putting it second behind gameplay and variations, but I kept it because it is DLC. The DLC roster in this game, probably still the best, I'd say. MK11 DLC was actually pretty good. I feel like, because of Spawn, Joker, characters like that were definitely very fun to play. And some characters in MK1 are good, I can't lie. Like Noob Saibot in MK1 is probably the best version of Noob Saibot ever created, in my opinion, in terms of gameplay. But the DLC in MKX is still probably unbeaten, like easily. I think I do want to give a shout out to Injustice 2. Injustice 2 DLC was great too. Sub-Zero was great. The Turtles were amazing. So I do want to give a shout out to Injustice 2. Red Hood was great. But the MKX DLC was definitely probably still most people's favorite, because you had Alien versus Predator. Leatherface was a character who was announced. People didn't really care for, but he was very fun gameplay wise. You had Jason. You had Triborg, which is still probably the best DLC character they've ever made. Literally a combination of all 3 robots plus Cyber Sub-Zero. So all those variations we talked about became 4 different characters. And yeah, like a Tremor, Tanya, yeah, those characters I forgot about who were really fun, and I'm probably forgetting some DLC characters. Raicho was kind of lame, was very fun gameplay wise. So this goes back to my, what I was talking about with the gameplay. So when a DLC character was announced for this game, even if you weren't the biggest fan of them DLC wise or roster wise, you knew their gameplay was going to be insanely fun. And Triborg, still incredibly fun to this day. Goro was DLC. Goro was actually my favorite character to play in that game, and he was DLC, so incredibly fun to play. Tremor was really fun, so DLC was incredibly fun. And the DLC characters were definitely, it was a great mix of, like, I think Triborg was great because it was a great mix of DLC characters, guest characters, and fan favorite MK characters. So that's why I think it was such a good blend. So yeah, DLC was great, I can't lie. And I think that was definitely a big standout aside from the gameplay, because it tied into the gameplay specifically, or it tied in together. DLC being as good as it was, especially like the designs of Predator and etc. Definitely a great, a big thing that MKX is remembered for. And the last section, I kind of just want to follow up on extras. MK9 was a reboot, a very successful reboot, so since MK9 story is probably still the best one, even if people didn't enjoy MKX's story because of the Kombat Kids, etc., it still followed up from MK9's momentum, so people were excited for, a follow-up of MK9 with a dark new twist. Obviously, MKX had like a darker theme, and a lot of people liked that, so that definitely followed up from MK9. And I did want to talk about factions, because factions, even though now people don't really talk about them, or I guess care for factions, at the time it was a great feature. I feel, having stuff like factions, even if you don't look back at it like years from now or years from MKX, being able to pick like a faction, I think it was 5 factions, being able to pick from them and kind of, give like a more of a cinematic feel to the game. And just, I feel like any features are good for a fighting game. So the fact that a game like MKX had more features than a game like MK1 in 2023, that really shows you the difference of how, how much care was put into the game back then, why people like the game so much. Because even though faction, like I mentioned, isn't a crazy thing to look back on, it being in the game in general was a great, addition to what was an already fun game in terms of gameplay and all that, right? And the crypt also returned. It was also an expanded crypt. It was like a first-person type of crypt, and rather than the MK9 type of crypt. So it was a cool follow-up mode to something that people liked in MK9. So that was definitely another feature that people enjoyed. And in this game, I think living towers and challenge towers were introduced. I think Injustice 1 had the watchtower missions, and MK9 had the 300, challenge tower, which probably is still people's favorite feature aside from gameplay. But living towers, challenge towers were introduced. Test your might. This game had test your might, had test your luck. Had a lot of these features. I didn't even put these on here because I'm just now remembering them. But now I'm even remembering additional features the game has. So all in all, if you really look at this game, gameplay wise, people enjoyed it the most out of any NRS title. The roster was great at the end. I feel like it's had a good mix of DLC characters as well as original MK characters. So great gameplay mixed with a good competitive scene, mixed with a good semi-decent roster that people really enjoy. The DLC was great, and you had all these additional features. This game was just fun, you know what I mean? Like I said, I'm not the biggest fan of this game because of, I am more so of a competitive player, and I view these games competitively more so than I guess casually. But even I can't deny that going back to play this game is still fun, and no matter no matter if I like this game competitively or not, or how I'm judging it, I can't deny how fun this game was to play. Or I don't play it anymore, to be honest, but I know a lot of people still do, and I can see why, because the gameplay aspect of it will probably never get old. And kind of leads me to how I think the next NRS game should be. So I was thinking of making a video, you know, like how I think MK12 should be, or MK whatever, MK2, whatever game they make next, how I think the gameplay should be, or I guess like a wish list. So if you guys want a video like that, definitely let me know. But yeah, I just want to make this video to kind of go over why MKX was so loved by so many people, kind of comparing and contrasting it to MK1, you know, based on my last video. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you guys for watching. And as always, if you guys enjoy these type of videos, drop some comments, drop a like, and let me know your thoughts. And with that, appreciate you all for watching. It's your boy Xombat here as always, and y'all have a great day. Peace out, y'all.